Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you with another literature review, and it is another Robert Louis Stevenson one. This, of course, is of the short story he published 2 years before his most famous work, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It is The Body Snatcher. Now, I've already touched on this story loosely last year when I did a Mard Talks episode on the Boris Karloff film from the 40s, The Body Snatcher. And as I mentioned at that time, I hadn't read the story. Well, now I have, because it's one of the stories included in this collection. Technically, I have two copies of it, because it's also in another horror anthology collection, but since I got this, I'm like, I might as well read it in here. Now, I can definitely say I do like the short story. It is different from the movie. Later on, I'll actually touch on some of the minor differences I noticed. But let's just say it's one of those adaptations that takes the basic story, adds to it, but also changes certain things around. Like I mentioned in the Martox episode, the Body Snatcher Stevenson based around a real life case, the Burke and Hare murders, where these two men killed a handful of people, like 5 to 10 people. I don't remember the exact figure off the top of my head, but they killed them and sold the bodies to a Dr. Knox to use in his anatomy lectures. Stevenson took that basic element and used it in the story. Now, whereas the film seems to take the basic idea and disconnect it totally from reality, Stevenson's story actually takes it and wraps the story around the case because our main characters, Fetis and McFarlane, actually work for Knox. He's not mentioned by name, he's just called Mr. K, so he's mentioned without being mentioned. I'm sure when the story was published, when people were reading it like, oh, I see where he's going with this. And of course, if you did not know this in modern time, at least this copy of it has an annotation at the first mention of the name that mentions him by name, like, oh, this is Dr. Knox. Just like throughout the rest of the stories, it has like little annotations to tell you references that a modern reader might not get, but a reader at the time would be like, oh, I see where he's getting that from. Now, most of the story is told as a reminiscence that is told from one of the characters to the narrator character. It begins on a night in an inn where a doctor is called for another person. He shows up, one of this group of 4 people that usually sit and drink in the common room. Hears the name of the doctor. He's like, Wolf McFarlane, he's here. Gets up, goes up to him, and is like, McFarlane, you old dog. You can tell he doesn't like this guy. The doctor sees him and is like, ooh, crap. They get into a minor altercation verbally. It's not really a big altercation. It's mainly Fetis, the character who was sitting in the common room, going over to the Dr. McFarlane, be like, hey, you remember it? It basically scares the crap out of McFarlane to the point where he runs. Fetis's buddies are all scratching their head going, what in the world is going on here? And Fetis leaves after only 3 drinks, and when he normally drinks 5. Now, one of them manages to get all the story out of Fetis, and that's where the story goes. Apparently, Fetis and McFarlane were medical students under Dr. K, Dr. Knox, and they helped him procure bodies illegally. You know, they'd be the ones that would pay the people who brought in bodies. Now, Fetis begins to suspect that they're gotten through other ways other than grave robbing, and his theory is confirmed when he recognizes the body of a girl he knew she was not dead the day before. So he's like, this is murder. And of course, McFarlane's like, buddy, calm down. Because if you go to the police with this, both of us are going to be implicated in this. And it's that eventually calms Fetis down. But he gets a little bit more uppity when McFarlane uses the little bit of power he has over Fetis to convince him to help him dispose of another body with their classmates. And that is the body of a man named Gray, who is a minor character in the story, but is made a more major character in the movie. That's the character played by Boris Karloff. Now, there's a scene that you could definitely see, okay, that's where they got the main part of the inspiration for his character in the film, because he's sitting at a table in a restaurant bar with McFarlane, you know, making fun of him, going like, ta-dee da ta la 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 la. If you've seen the movie, you can kind of guess what I'm talking about with this. Now, McFarlane kills Gray, and him and Fetis dispose of the body. After that, though, Knox runs short of bodies again, so these two have to go grave robbing. And this leads into the weird ending, which I'd say it comes off a little bit better in the story than it does in the movie, because in the movie, it's like, okay, I kind of see what they're going for, but I don't know if it fully makes sense. Here, I can see what Stevenson's going for. It's supposed to be one of those endings. It's supposed to be a spooky supernatural occurrence. I'm not going to state what it is, but if you've seen the movie and you haven't read the story, you know what I'm talking about. And it just ends after that. And with that, you could sort of see what split these two originally, and why Fettis has been living in this town all these years, and why him seeing McFarlane after all these years, he's like, "You dirty rat! I never thought I'd see you again." And McFarlane's like, "Yeah, okay," because he has that little bit of power over him. McFarlane's become that good doctor, and now he has that power. Now Fettis has that power over him, that if Fettis were to go to the police now, everything would be ruined for him. Now, of course, that's just a little thing at the back of the reader's mind, because Stevenson never brings it up, but it's there. And that's one thing I'll say I'm glad they actually brought forward in the movie a little bit. Now, speaking of the movie is faithful to the story for the most part, but it does change some things. Now, things that are not in the story that are in the movie, the whole little subplot involving the girl with the surgery, that is definitely original. The whole thing about Fettis being a new doctor is in the story, but things are changed around. Now, Knox and all that is eliminated almost entirely, except for a little bit of the backstory of the McFarlane character in the movie. Now, here's the thing. Gray in the movie contains elements of his literary character and some of McFarlane's literary character, whereas movie McFarlane contains some of his literary character and a little bit of Fettis, whereas Fettis contains a little bit of his literary character, and he's changed slightly to where he becomes audience insertion, because he's a new doctor in the movie. He still is kind of that in the book, but he's a little more innocent in the movie, which is why I say he's the audience insertion. The more hardened aspect is given to the McFarlane character in the movie, and he also is the head doctor. He's not like the upper assistant like he is in the... and of course, the expansion of Gray's character, I think, works in the movie, and it also takes all the different people that they deal with to get bodies from the book and combines it into one character, which of course makes McFarlane's need to get rid of him like he does in the story make a lot more sense, and it has a bigger impact, as it's like he has all this knowledge over him, and if they don't get rid of him, there's nothing really else much to say about both of them. You know, it was one of those instances where it's a good story and an interesting adaptation. If you haven't read the story and you're a fan of classic literature, I definitely say you should read it. If you don't have it in your collection, I recommend you get this edition of The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Other Stories from Barnes & Noble. It has that in there. It also has a couple other stories in here. Lodging for the Night, The Suicide Club, and Mark Heem, which that's probably the next one I'll read after I finish Around the World in 80 Days, mainly because I hear it it's kind of a precursor to the themes he would do with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is like, should be an interesting read. And if you haven't seen the movie, it definitely comes with my recommendation, because Karloff owns that movie. Of course, the only sad thing is it's the last time him and Lugosi teamed up, and nothing really else more to say about that other than Lugosi's kind of an afterthought.